1078 officer in need.
What's up, guys? It's Matt from the 1078 Project. Hey, if you're new to the organization, a little bit about us. The 1078 Project is a non-profit organization that's been founded and developed by law enforcement officers who have been involved in critical incidents and officer-involved shootings. Our goal at the 1078 Project is to provide mental, spiritual, and practical support to law enforcement officers as they navigate the difficult times surrounding an officer-involved shooting. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode, and I'll see you on the other side, boys. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 1078 Project podcast. Today's guest is an entrepreneur. He's a 30-year police veteran. He has a master's degree from Boston University. He specializes in police tactics and PTSD and plant-based medicines. He's a former Atlanta police officer and a New York area police officer. Today's guest is Michael Morgan. What's up, Mike? How you doing, man?
I'm good, Matt. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm really excited for today's episode. We took a little time to talk off camera, and you're speaking my language, so I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited for what you're doing and the mission that you have. Like I said, I'll give you the opportunity to kind of tell your life story. I think everybody will immediately know exactly where you're from when you open up your mouth. But
Can't hide this thing.
Yeah, did you grow up in New York?
Yes, I did. And first, let me thank you for having me on. I'm humbled and honored anytime anyone wants to take any amount of time to hear about my story. So Thank you very much.
I feel the exact same way, man. People ask me like, hey, man, you mind talking? I'm like, you sure me, man? Like, there's a lot more people out there that are a lot better than I am. So
Yeah, we all think that. But you know what? We all have our stories. And we went through what we went through for a reason. So
yeah, for sure.
Hopefully mine helps someone. But yes, I was born and raised in New York, more specifically Long Island, New York, North Belmore, which is about 45 minutes east of Manhattan on the South Shore of Long Island. I was born, awesome. Had a sister, grew up with my parents. My dad was a fireman in the New York City Fire Department. He actually did a year as a police officer, rolled over, they call it, to fire department, and he ended up doing 35. He retired in 96. He was actually a Chiefs driver, so he was at the World Trade Center in 93 at the first bombing, had he been still active, he would have been down at 9/11 with one of the he drove the chief of the department, so he would have been there with the chief. He may have been with Ray Downey, who unfortunately lost his life, and Ray's son and I actually played ice hockey together at Hofstra University, so very small world.
No way.
Excuse me.
Did your dad ever tell you why he made the switch?
I don't know. I guess he's told me a couple of stories about corruption, him seeing corruption, and, wanted no part of it, and decided that the fire was going to be a better suit for him.
Okay, cool. What was it like being a firefighter's kid?
As far as firefighter's kid, I don't know about firefighter, but being my father's kid, he was a very stern guy. Irish guy. He grew up in a household where wasn't exactly warm. There wasn't a lot of hugging and kissing, and he became the same. And I was actually thinking deeply about my childhood the other day. I kind of had questions. My wife was asking me questions about sometimes why I'm not more affectionate, and sometimes I kind of get quiet. And I really went deep, and I was thinking about my household. And my household used to be very silent, punctuated with little points of talk and noise, whereas a lot of people's were opposite. The household was typically very noisy, and they would be punctuated with periods of silence. But my house was kind of quiet. My dad was a very demanding guy. We, unfortunately, and I would love to say we had a great relationship, but it was very contentious. I can honestly say we never had a conversation. It was always him telling me what to do. And, at some point in my early teens, I just decided to tune him out. He was so negative. I remember we were in the car one night and he was just going off on something. And I'm thinking to myself, why does this guy like me? I'm like, my teachers love me. My friends' parents love me. All my coaches love me. I was a big athlete. And I'm like, he doesn't like me. Like, he's always talking down to me. And I'm like, I'm not listening to anything he's got to say. He's always negative. And after that, I just went in one ear and out the other. And I was a great kid. It wasn't like I was misbehaving or anything, but the negativity just got to me. And it's amazing. I was talking to my wife the other day. I'm like, I don't know how I grew up with confidence, never developed any anxiety issues or anything like that because, by the book, the way I was raised, I should have. But yeah, just I arose above those, thank God, and ended up going to college, got an accounting degree from Hofstra University. It's a funny story. So I graduate in May, got my job with Avon pharmaceutical company, but I was in the corporate portion as an accountant. So the first day I go to work in October, you're supposed to be all excited about this new career you're embarking on. He just, finished his college career, yet put in all this hard work. And I'm on the Long Island Railroad going into Manhattan commuting, and I'm just so flat. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you not more excited? Get there, I meet associates and bosses that I'm going to be working with. I'm given a task about 11 a.m. Shortly thereafter, I wake up with my head in my hand, and I just fell asleep. Get up, walk over to another cubicle. The guy I just met, he seemed really cool. I'm like, what's up, brother? You like this stuff? He's like, F no, I hate it. I'm like, there is no way I'm doing this the rest of my life, man. I'm not sitting in a cubicle for 30, 35 years, making no difference to anyone. No one's going to know whether I lived or died except my close family and friends. And, excuse me, just started going introspective about what I wanted to do with my life. Answer became law enforcement. FBI was what I actually wanted to apply to at the time. This is back in 93. They were on a federal hiring freeze. And, that door was shut, but when one shuts, another one opens. And shortly thereafter, I met a brother of a good friend of mine who had just moved down to Atlanta. And he was telling me how great it was. And so young, they're building up for the Olympics, so cheap. I said, you know what, brother? I want to get out of New York anyway. I said, I'm going to get some police experience. I'm going to apply to the Atlanta Police Department, get some police experience. When the FBI starts hiring again, I will apply with them. And it was funny because I think U.S. Marshals were one of the last to stop hiring. And you told me you were a marshal, and I'd taken that test. And I got a 95 on the test. But growing up, my father told me if you got anything less than 100 on an EFDNY, you were not getting a job. So when I got to 95, I'm like, man, that sucks. And then later in my career, you guys, marshals, were looking for someone in Atlanta, and we were helping them. I ended up talking to an agent. I'm like, yeah, I told him the story. Got a 95, sucked. He's like, 95? He's like, it's one of the highest scores I've ever heard, bro. I'm like, yeah, they never called me. You guys went on a hiring freeze. He's like, oh, man, you would have been on no problem. So whatever. That was my destiny. So that was it. Moved to Atlanta in August of 93. Went in the academy a couple of months later and graduated. Well, came out in April. It's a crazy story. First night out of the academy, because we're going to be talking about different things that we see on the job that impact us mentally. Mm-hmm. First night, I'm doing a midnight tour. So we start 11 p.m., 7 a.m. By midnight, so my first homicide scene. Crazy story. He was an Atlanta fire captain, who was on suspension. He had sexual allegations made against him about him and younger girls. And I guess they proved to be true after this story. So he goes out, picks up a prostitute, 16 years old, decides he wants to smoke crack with her, pulls up to the corner, local dope boy selling his wares. The kid looks in the car, and who does he see but his 16-year-old cousin? Pulls out the gun, boom, one in his head. That was it. So that's first hour. 4 hours later, we get a second call, my second homicide. So within 5 hours, 2 homicides. So that's the way I started my Atlanta career. It was nuts. It only got crazier.
Crazy. I want to take a step back real quick. Was
sure.
Since your relationship with your dad was pretty sketchy, were you really close to your mom?
I was definitely closer to my mom. I wouldn't say close. But we definitely had a good relationship. Yeah. And it wasn't like, I couldn't stand my dad. I mean, this is normality to me. Mm-hmm. But I was always trying to get closer. I guess I was always trying to impress him with sports. And the weird thing about it was, man, I was, pretty good at sports. I used to make most of the all-star teams, but he would never say I'm proud of you. And then one day we went into the firehouse for something, and, a bunch of guys were there. And one of the guys was like, hey, man, your father never stops talking about you. I'm like, me? He's like, yeah, he's always bragging about you doing this and that. I'm like, I was so taken aback. And then later on, in recounting the story, this is over the past couple of years, I think he was doing it just to kind of make himself look better. I mean, he was doing the best he could, but, at the same point, I think he could have tried harder. And, it is what it is. He made me the man I am. I didn't like the man he was, to be honest with you. I loved him. He's my father, but we all have our tales of woe, and mine could have been a lot worse. I had a clean home. I was well taken care of, but mentally we just never developed any type of relationship. So it's sad to me.
I think, food for thought, obviously we're going to talk about mental health stuff in the future is, your dad's a firefighter for a pretty long period of time, and maybe he was struggling to deal with some of the things and that he's seen throughout his career as well. Do you have kids now?
I have 2 stepsons. They're grown, but great kids. I love them.
How did that change your? How did your relationship with your dad change the way that you parent?
Well, my situation is a little bit different. This is my second marriage. So when I got together with my wife, my eldest stepson was about 22 years old, just graduated college. The youngest was a senior in high school. So, and they lived with their father. So it wasn't like I was doing too much parenting per se.
Okay. Yeah.
We developed great relationships with each other, more friends. They know if they could come to me for anything, I'm here. But I definitely don't ever criticize them. And I guess maybe that's a duality of them having a father and me being the stepdad. But, I tell them, if you need anything ever, do not ever hesitate. I don't care if it's 3 a.m., call me up. I just try to show them, as much love as I can. I mean, I love them. They're great kids. Had to have biological kids. I would love for them to be them. But, I saw things that my father did and that I would change, and things that I kind of had personality-wise about myself that were kind of formed after him that I tried to change. So I think I'm very self-aware. Hopefully I'm not sounding like I'm perfect, because I'm far from that.
Yeah.
I have many faults, but
we all do.
Yeah. I try to be as supportive as I can in those relationships.
Did Atlanta have their own academy? So when you went off to Atlanta's academy, okay, so you got hired there from the very beginning, went through their law enforcement academy, and then went through.
Correct. So I got hired late August. What they do is they'll hire you as an employee. So I actually worked as a recruit for the Bureau of Taxi Cabs for a couple of months till they get enough people to class up. So our class is rather small, 35 people. So it was a couple of months, and then I went in early November. It's a 5-month academy, and then we ended up getting out in very beginning of April.
Atlanta has to be one of the largest police departments in the country, I'd guess, somewhere around there. How big is it?
One of the larger. I know manpower-wise, capacity-wise, we were supposed to be at 2,500. We were always short. I think we were more like 1,500, possibly 2,000. But, I came from Suffolk County. After that, we were 2,500. I think Nassau County, which is our brother agency on the west end of Long Island, western portion of Long Island, is that, if not maybe more. But then you get to New York City, and they've had upwards of like low 40s. It's like a army.
Yeah,
no one compares to that. I think LA is like 11,000 and change. Yeah, it's crazy.
40. Wow.
Yeah, so many layers, man. There's cops everywhere when you go in there sometimes.
Yeah, dude, that's a brotherhood, man. It's so weird because you just don't see that type of brotherhood anywhere else.
No,
at least my experience being up in New York and having those guys kind of take us around and show us around New York, and you just don't find that places. Everybody, the cops just seem so glued together. And I'm sure they probably have their own internal problems, but to me, I always think like, it's a relatively liberal area. It's like their only friends are each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing
tough.
they really rely on.
Especially these days, tough place to work. Boston's got a very good relationship as far as, fraternal and being welcoming to, out-of-state cops and showing them around. So there are definitely places in the U.S. that show that. It's few and far between. Mm-hmm. But, I know a bunch of cops from New York that have been to Boston, and like those guys are aces.
Yeah.
So, I tried to do the same when I was in Atlanta, but, it's such a smaller agency.
Yeah, I got to check that off the list. I've never been to Boston. I need to check Boston off the list.
Yeah, me too. It was funny. I got a master's degree from Boston University. It's online, but I never went there for my graduation, so I still never been. But I've heard phenomenal things. And I was 3 hours away. I don't know why I never went.
So you get a degree in accounting, and was that always in your personality? Were you always the guy that like were there fears leading up to starting a job in accounting where you're like, man, I don't know if I could really do this, or was it just you just seen the aura around the place of everybody kind of sitting behind a desk doing absolutely nothing that you're like, I can't, this isn't for me?
No, you know what it was that kind of attracted me to it? My mom's brother, my Uncle Joe, was a CPA, and he ended up owning a few firms, or starting a few firms, and he did very well financially. So my father was always in my ear about money, 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 money.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I got older, I realized money means nothing if you're not happy.
Yeah.
But, I was kind of going off of that virtue of making money. And I didn't want to get a generalized business degree. I knew if you had that accounting degree, you were on that track to start a professional career. And I actually did not mind the study of it in school. It's when it became a practical application. I was sitting in an office. Even as a cop, I started going the detective route, and I just did not want to be inside. So I loved being outside. I loved being on the street. It's almost like I was allergic to being inside. I hated it.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I can't do it. And one of my bosses is a former detective, and he keeps telling me go to the bureau. He's like, man, go to the bureau, go to the bureau. I'm like, dude, no. Yeah. Just tell me who the bad guy is, and I'll go get him. That's
exactly.
All I don't want to do anything. And just to set the record straight, I was deputized as a U.S. Marshal. I didn't work for the Marshal Service. I was
task force.
Yeah, I was task force. So you start in Atlanta. That's your first night. You see your first homicide, right? Growing up, have you ever experienced like major traumas like that? Seen bad car accidents or anything like nothing whatsoever?
I remember specifically, I was a young kid. I saw a couple of fatal accidents. I remember one a couple of blocks away. A kid got hit by a car, and I think he ended up losing his leg. I mean, we got there. You could see his leg was not in a position it should be, and that was clear as day. But it was never something that I reeled back from. It was just not that I was exposed to a lot of it, but it was nothing that ever scared me.
Yeah.
I talk about like my career in Atlanta, like it was an education for a middle class white boy from New York. It was insanity. There were things that would be going on. And I remember one specifically, I'm talking to my partner. I'm like, bro, this is insane. I can't even believe this is going on. We're actually in a pursuit doing about 125 on the interstate. I was passing people in the left-hand emergency lane because they weren't getting out of the way fast enough. This guy was doing about 140, turn his lights off. It was nuts. And he's like, no, keep going. He ended up going to the DEA. Great guy. Hub Jordan. I love that guy.
Yeah. So after you experience this, you go to the shooting scene, you leave the scene, and was there any what year around?
This is going to be April 94.
Okay. So 1994. So yeah, law enforcement had like zero emphasis on mental health whatsoever. It was probably like, hey buddy, we don't care. Move on. You got other calls.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. I mean, literally, we were speaking about officer-involved shootings earlier. My old partner got in a shooting, and they wanted to put him back on the street 2 days later. I think they literally tried the next day to put him back on the street. I'm like, bro, tell them no, man. You need a little more time for yourself. You're not sleeping well. Don't go crazy. But it was nuts. I don't even think they made him go to see psych services. I'm unsure about that. I don't want to put say something that's not true, but yeah, there was nothing.
I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't back in the day, honestly.
Yeah, I really don't think they did. Once they cleared him.
The old way of thinking was you get somebody, they get into something and you throw them right back out there to go back to work. And, there are benefits to that, obviously. To get back on the horse is really important, but at the same time, you need some time for your mind to kind of put those Polaroids in the right places so you have a true understanding of what actually happened.
Obviously, yeah, absolutely.
So, how did all your time in Atlanta, was it all on patrol?
My first 5 years were in Zone 3, which is on patrol, and I transferred to the motorcycle squad in June of 98, where I remained until I left to go to Suffolk County in October of 03.
Like, you break down the districts. What's the roughest district in Atlanta?
The roughest was Zone 3 where I worked. Zone 3 and Zone 1 ran neck and neck. Where I worked, it's funny, the nickname was Little Vietnam, and it was Little Vietnam. It was insane.
Is it like the
Zone 1 was
populace, like huge Asian population or something, or
no. It was just that it was insane.
oh,
It's
just
so
lots of stuff going
violent that
on?
they used to call it Little Vietnam. There's so
Oh,
many
okay.
shootings and killings. I think there was 6 zones at the time, and I think at the time we used to have about 40% of the murders in my zone alone. Like,
40%.
it
Wow.
was insane. We had so many projects, and crack was basically at its epidemic, at the height of the epidemic at the time. And man, one night, this is no joke, and this is not the only night it happened. I remember different nights happening 3 times, but I went from shooting to shooting to shooting to shooting one night. 4 shootings in a row, multiple other nights where we had 3 shootings. It was insane. I thought it was a normal place. The first time I ever policed. And my cousin had come down for a ride along. He used to work in the A3, East New York, which is not a nice place to work in New York City. And he looks at me, and we used to call each other Morgs. His last name is Morgan too. He's like, Morgs, what the F are you doing here, man? I'm like, what? This, A3's not like this? He's like, dude, this is insanity. And we were one-man cars, all NYPs, 2-man cars. Most of our cars were one-man. So, you get out. I went one time, and this should not have been the case, but I handled the shooting alone. We had 5 cars in service. I was on day watch at the time. When we pull cars, when there's not enough guys, there's no overtime. So you just start pulling cars. So maximum amount of cars would be 12 on the road. We had 5 at that point, and I'm handling shooting solo.
So the entire city of Atlanta had 12 guys working.
No, this is in my zone.
Oh, I was about to say, oh my God.
Yeah, zone 3.
What do you think the population of a single zone is?
Oh, man. Thousands. I can't even tell you what it is. It was a densely populated place. Sometimes we get out and there'd be 2 of us on a call on a project, and as soon as you get out, either you hit 12 or you hit whistling, or after police, and people start coming out. Man, it was a violent place. I was a violent guy. Yeah, you have to be. Thank God, my boy George Faraday. I trained with a guy for years and was pretty proficient at fighting, and was very comfortable with extreme violence. And it was often instituted. They tried you, man. They smelled fear. If you showed fear, they were on you. There's predators out there, and if you're not ready to get down, you're done. Here's a good story for you. So we're on footbeat now. So I come out of the academy in April. We graduated in May after 6 weeks of field training. I get assigned to zone 3. We're on footbeat. Probably the beginning of fall. I was in a precinct where detectives turned out of it was called the 15 Field Investigation Team, and they were short 2 guys this particular night. So they asked myself and my partner if we wanted to work with them. We're like, hell yeah. 2 rookies working plain clothes with these guys. So the boss say, okays it. We go out. We're investigating the known drug area, and we're out of the car talking. There's about 10 guys around us. It's cool. They knew them, and nothing going on as far as just us talking to them, basically. So a car rolls up as we're talking to these guys. I walk up to the passenger door, and I shine my flashlight in. I see the guy. He's got a Carhartt jacket. The pocket's really big, and it's kind of open, but I can see the butt of a gun. So I open the door. It's unlocked. I grab the gun, tell him to get out of the car, put his hands behind his back. For some reason, my partner, at this day, I don't know why, gets in between us. This guy elbows my partner in the face, takes off, foot chases on. I'm right behind him. He hits a right turn. There was sand. He falls, gets up, squares off at me. Now, unbeknownst to me, this dude, he's probably actually a serial killer. He ran the hood in this portion. I think it was Mechanicsville. His name is Rick. It's a funny end to the story, but he was a bad dude. He had a lot of bodies on him, and no one would testify against him, and he had no fear of the police. So he squares off with me. He throws a left. I block with my right. I still have my flashlight in my hand. Came over. I'm not going to lie. I tried to break his collarbone. I went a little high. He screams, Muay Thai behind the head. Boom, knee to the face. Broke that nose. Done. And started like a mini riot because all his boys saw what was happening. He got lucky because he dropped 200 hits of the prisoner van that night, but it was so insane we didn't catch it. But funny part of the story is he's on federal probation, so I get a notification a couple months later for a federal revocation notification trial. So I go there, I'm testifying, and one of the attorneys asked for a sidebar. So the judge is to my left, speaking to her. I'm looking around the room, and all of a sudden he and I lock eyes, and then we just start mugging each other, and he's basically IFing each other. And I meant to mouth the words, but I said out loud, can I use profanity?
Yeah.
Here, okay. I meant to mouth it, but I said, fuck you, out loud in federal court. The judge must have got whiplash because her head swung around so fast. I'm like, I apologize, Your Honor. I looked at the prosecutor. This lady didn't know whether to go shit or go blind. Her mouth was agape for like a minute. And I just was kind of like chuckling myself, like, man, I wish someone could have seen that. That was hysterical. But yeah, he ended up getting revoked, went back, and came out. And he was just a bad dude. He ended up killing a SWAT lieutenant's brother, but they couldn't put that on him. Yeah, they couldn't put that on him. SWAT lieutenant ended up coming back to the zone eventually. He was my boss. Pulled him aside one day. I'm like, I just want to give you condolences on the loss of your brother. But just to let you know, I put it on Rick that night. And he's like, oh, yeah, I told him a story. He's like, appreciate him, Oaks. So, pretty funny story.
Dude, the hood is different, man. You know, like, I have a feeling that St. Louis City and Atlanta are probably very similar in nature. St. Louis City's it's a really, really rough place. You know, it's
this is California, St. Louis City?
No, St. Louis, Missouri. That's
Missouri. Funny story. You want to hear some of that? So the show Cops filmed twice in Atlanta, once in '96, and I think they came back in '98. So the first time I had just gone a day tour, they were only filming on midnights and evening watch, so I didn't get to be on air. And the second time I went to Motorcycle Squad, so I missed it completely. But I was talking to the crew the first time. I'm like, yo, it's just the craziest place because we were hearing stories. These guys are awesome. Because guys would be getting in chases. These guys would get involved. They'd be putting hands on people if the cop needed help. Like, they were great. So I'm like, is this the craziest place you guys have been to? They're like, nah, St. Louis, man. St. Louis is insane. I'm like, crazier than this? They're like, not much, but yes.
Yeah, dude. So, it's the Wild West, man. It's It's a pretty rough place. It's like number 1 or number 2 in murders per capita every year between there and like Detroit. It's a pretty wild place. So that environment is a funny story. I stopped a car one night I work in a suburb that's just outside of St. Louis. I stop a car and I get out and it's a St. Louis City cop. So I'm like, I'm talking to him like, hey man, what's up? How you doing? How's everything going down in the city? And he's like, man, it's terrible. He's a project cop, so he just works in the Peabody projects, which is a really, really, really rough project. Like, you used to not go in the Peabodys unless you had like 4 dudes with you. You know what I mean? Like, you never rolled into the Peabodys on your own. Yep. He's like, man, we're obviously this is, maybe a couple years ago, recruiting was down so bad that they had this poor man, like a 55-year-old dude, or I think he's 53, 2 years away from retirement, just trying to get to retirement. They got him working the Peabodys by himself. He's like, dude, I don't know what to do. Like, we're stuck down here. He's like, I want to get out, but I'm so close to retirement that I don't want to lose all the stuff that I built down there. This poor old man's working. I don't want to call him old. He's 55, or 53, but this poor old dude's working down in the Peabodys by himself. He's like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, you've been there. I've been there. People who have not been there do not understand how much stress this guy was going through on a daily basis. It is insane. It's like a war. Literally, it's a war that you're fighting every day.
Yeah, it is, man. You talked about like violence earlier, and everybody always wants to law enforcement is not meant, like, the public doesn't want law enforcement to be violent, but it's part of who we are. It's part of what separates the good from the bad is, that cops are capable of violence, and that when people bring violence towards cops, that they're met with equal and greater violence. And that's something that's, it's never really talked about in law enforcement. People just kind of seem to roll over it. But, that violence is what separates. That's why you get to sleep in your house quietly at night, is because there's guys out there that are capable of that violence and willing to fight off that violence for you. So there's never been truer words. Life is about balance, and cops have to be capable of that violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people, it's easy to be an expert. People try to handcuff someone that doesn't want to be handcuffed. Watch how difficult that is. People have no concept of reality. And listen, man, we all write a blank check up to and including our lives. Like, I was willing to give my life to absolute strangers who couldn't care less about me. And I remember it was such a violent place. I was taking a shower one day and I was just thinking about it. I got out of the shower and I looked in the mirror and I'm like, and I'm not glorifying death by any stretch. Had I been killed, it would have devastated my family, friends. But I looked in the mirror and I said, God, if it's my destiny to die in the line of duty, I'm like, I do not fear death. And it's not false bravado. I never fear death. But please let me kill the guy that kills me. That's all I asked. And truly, to this day, meant it, mean it.
Yeah.
I don't fear death.
Dude, that's a prayer that I say all the time. I pray to God, like, hey, man, it's your will, your way. I surrender this to you. What you want to happen is going to happen. And if that means something bad has to happen to me, then that means something bad has to happen to me. Just take care of my family, you know?
Yep.
And until people are willing to look themselves in the mirror and say that prayer and have that conversation with God and come to peace with, there may be a time in your life where you're going to die for somebody else. You can get off your keyboards and you can stop typing stuff on Twitter. You know, we're in a recruiting crisis. If you want to come be a policeman and you want to change the system, put your app in, buddy.
Show us how it's done. That's what I tell them all the time. Yeah. I am willing to learn, man. If I did everything wrong, I'll admit it. You school me. But sitting there behind keyboard warriors, crack me up.
Yeah, were you this big whenever you're in Atlanta? Like that dude squared up to you and you looked like that? I'm about 230. I'm about 240 now. I'm actually leaning out. A little too big. I'm having little back problems. But I was probably about 220 at the time, something like that. So I've been, about 220 most of my career. And then over the past few years, I got really, really serious about lifting and, put on probably another 15 pounds, something like that. And this extra 5. This extra 5 is now muscle, so I got to. I'll get back down to 220. I'll feel good. If I'm 220, 56 with abs, not many men in the world could say that. Yeah, dude, it's winter time too. You're supposed to stay warm. You got to eat a little bit more, right?
It's 85 and sunny in South Florida, baby.
Oh, you live in Florida now?
Yeah. We moved out of Florida last December.
So, family friend owns a house that's close to Anna Maria Island in Bradenton, Florida, and the amount of New Yorkers that have fled New York and are now there's pizzerias everywhere in Florida.
Yeah. Like, they call it the 6th borough of Florida.
Dude, it's
there's 5 boroughs in New York. Now it's the 6th. It's amazing. It's everywhere. We go to Crunch Fitness. The manager is from Huntington, which is where my precinct used to be in New York. I mean, there is so many people that I've met. I saw a Palm Beach County sheriff one day. We were both coming out of our storage units. We ended up talking each other up. And he's like, a girl named Rita Engels? I'm like, and he used, she had a married name. So whatever it was, he's like, Rita, whatever. I said, Engels? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I used to work with her for 10 years, probably. He's like, yeah, she works with us now. I'm like, what? It's such a small world. The older you get, the smaller it gets.
Dude, it's nice. It's warm.
Yep.
Not so cold.
Love it. I can't stand that cold weather.
I don't blame you. In Missouri, if you sell your house, you don't have enough money to buy a house in Florida. So that's the thing about New York is if you buy a house in New York, man, you're going to sell it. You'll sell it and make a bunch of money in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had to sum up your time in Atlanta on patrol, how could you sum it up?
I would say
I'll ask this. You said you're a middle-class white kid from New York. When you left patrol in Atlanta, how did your perspective or the way that you viewed the world change?
That's a good question. I guess I'd seen so much death and destruction that I told myself that it was not going to take a piece of my soul. And in some respects, it did. I think I've gotten it back since. But I learned to appreciate the beauty of life. So if I saw a beautiful sunset, birds, anything going on, like I would literally appreciate it. It would not just fly by me, pass by me, and I wouldn't acknowledge it. I saw so much evil in the world. And, it's good and bad. I became so much more knowledgeable. I became a great street cop. I wish everyone could go work in St. Louis or Atlanta and then go back to wherever you were, because there is nothing that will make you a good cop better than being in these places. And I appreciated that. But, you see so much evil and death and devastation. And that kind of becomes your perspective as to that's the world. Mm-hmm. When, it's really not. The world, life is a beautiful thing. And you don't want to get tainted in that respect and get that negative attitude. I saw a lot of guys, man, they went down that path where they just became melancholy and angry at the world. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. Mm-hmm. And this job can do it to you if you allow it. But I consciously chose, I another path.
Yeah. Were there things that you were doing to try and take care of yourself when you were a young cop? Like things that you were like, man, I should probably do this or that or whatever else to try and make sure that I have an outlet for this stuff?
Well, I always lifted. I trained, fighting. I got into a little bit of jiu-jitsu down there. I tried not to make all my friends solely police officers because I did not want to be discussing that stuff on and off duty all the time. I always had a dog, or for the most part had a dog. I mean, I love dogs. So, I wouldn't say that I was at a higher consciousness like I am now and realized how important mental health is in some respects, but in others, I did. So, I guess I did the little things again, not letting myself get enveloped by all this evil and negativity I saw on a daily basis. Always tried to keep my life light as far as joking around. But yeah, nothing like, journaling. I would meditate, but to be perfectly frank, most of my meditations are done on cardio. And I figured this out the other day. I mean, I would do cardio 30 minutes a day, and all I would think about was fighting, knife fights, gunfights, multiple opponents, things going wrong in every scenario. So when something happened, I was ready. Like I would fight 3 guys, not one guy. And, I pictured the first guy getting a shot off. Bam, I'm stunned. What would I do? Or I ran out of bullets in a gunfight. Now I go to my knife. Now what do I do? Tactically, what do I do? I rehearsed it and I figured it out. I probably did this for about 3,000 hours. So even if you take 2,000 away, for 1,000 hours, I was in this violence in my head. But it was just conditioning myself to where it happened. And when it happened on the street, I was ready.
Yeah,
because you have to.
It's weird that you say that. Last night, my daughter, she's in first grade, and she had a play, like a first grade Christmas whatever thing,
Yep.
First off, it was great. It was super cute. It was hilarious to watch.
Oh yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah,
so innocent.
But when we got there was chairs set up in this room, and my wife and I walk around and we pick a spot, and I start. It's so weird because cops are just such doomsday preppers, man. So I move over to the one side of the room, like, hey, let's sit here. So we sit on the far side of the room. I'm like looking around, and like there's a door right there. And I'm thinking to myself while this is happening, I'm like, all right, well, if anything happens here, I'll just push the wife and the kids that way. I'll deal with the threat. And I thought to tell my wife, hey, babe, if anything bad happens, go this way, go to that door. But I didn't want to put that anxiety on her, because she's not she's not like me, obviously. But it's just such a weird thing, man. It's like your brain stays in that violent encounter mindset of you're always thinking about, okay, well, if this happens, then that. And the old saying of if you go to a restaurant, the cop's going to take the seat where he faces the door. And if I go to the movies with my wife, we sit in the area closest to the exit, so I can push her out. I can get her out of the way before I have to go deal with whatever. It's just such a weird thing, man. And I don't think people. I think maybe you talked about you interviewed or you talked to a SEAL for your podcast last week. Those dudes, guaranteed they're always thinking that way. I guarantee they're always mentally preparing. If something happens, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move that direction. I'm going to address this. Guaranteed. But outside of that military and law enforcement community, I don't think the rest of the world ever thinks about any of those things at all.
No, it's not a conscious thought unless they've been in a situation that dictates that they become kind of hypervigilant from that point on. What we do is not natural, so let's say that everyone else is running away from it. We're running into it willingly. And to be honest with you, I loved it, man, with every fiber of my being. I remember my buddy and I, Frank Lupo, got shot at in a place called Thomasville Heights in 95. And we couldn't return fire because the backstop was not clear. There's a crazy amount of people. And afterwards, let me tell you this whole story because it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
I went to him. I'm like, bro, that was the craziest adrenaline rush I ever had in my life. I had the adrenaline dump. And I'm like, damn, I could have just died. But there was no fear. And I went to him like, Luke, man, that was insane. That adrenaline was just coursing through my veins. And I loved it. This story was this guy who's a crackhead. He ends up getting in a fight with his girlfriend's brother, gets his ass kicked, goes home, gets a gun. That's when we got the call about a fight. No gun yet. And what happens in Atlanta was they'll call the early cars in on the hour, then the late cars in a half hour. This way, you don't have everyone in at the same time at the precinct. So the early cars got called in. This was actually a call in one of their sectors, so we had to go far away. By the time we got there, we thought he'd be gone, and he was not. So I just have to plug this thing in here quick. So we get to the house, and literally pull up. So when we pull up, here's the side of the building. He's in the front. Here's the rear. So we're pulling up to it, and we see him shooting into the apartment. So he comes around, sees us. He's got a 357, and it's funny because when I was in the Atlanta Academy, we had someone come in who told us about the physiological effects from high stress situations, one of which being tunnel vision, the other being auditory response is muted. This dude is shooting at us probably about 25 yards away, maybe 30, with a 357, and all I could see was the muzzle flashes. I could not hear the gunshots. So, like I said, we gave chase. There were too many people in the back. I went, got the car, came back around. My partner lost him. We got a call about 10 minutes later about a burglary in an apartment right there. Like, yo, we got him. The help call was in. So it's he and I and two other hardcore dudes. So I was pumped with the four that were going in. We go to the top of the stairs. Three go this way. I open this. There's a door right here. I open it. About 11:30 at night now. There's about a 2-year-old kid sitting in a bed. And here's his crib. I'm like, something's not right, man. I'm like, what's up, buddy? Anyone else here? He's like, I go, where is he? And he points to his crib. So I'm like, psst. Get the other three back. I'm like, under the crib. So we flip the lights on. He's under the crib. Tries to fight us. Did not go well.
You need a dog, dude.
Yeah. At the time, Atlanta didn't have canines. It goes back to the civil rights thing where they would stick dogs on people, and
really,
they still don't have patrol dogs. They'll have drug dogs, bomb dogs, but they don't have patrol dogs.
All of Atlanta Police Department doesn't have bite dogs.
Yeah, I don't think to this
way.
day, I don't think they have patrol dogs. I think it's just drug dogs. I think it's bomb dogs. If anyone's watching this, you guys can comment when you watch this podcast. But I still believe that's the case. So we go in, cuff him up, get him out of here. The kid's father comes in, he gets him. I'm like, hey, buddy, give him a high five. You're so brave. Thank you so much. I'm like, did he have anything with him? He's like, so I'm like, where'd he put it? So he points under the mattress, at the mattress. Pick it up. Here's the gun. Pop it open. Reloaded. He was ready to rock and roll, man. He had 6 fresh ones in the, it was a revolver in the chamber. No so way. That dude got 2 years to serve for shooting at police. Disgusting. But wow. Yeah, so afterwards, like I said, I was like, Luke, man, that's the craziest adrenaline rush I ever had. I loved it.
Yeah, there's something about your body reacts a certain way, and you enter this like hyper vigilant, like weird flow state. Like the lizard brain is activated, and you're able to see, perceive, operate, and do things at a rate of speed that you never, ever, ever thought that you would be able to do. I still say to this day, there is nothing that will ever give anybody an adrenaline rush like you and your dog running out in the woods at like 3 o'clock in the morning when it's pitch black after somebody that did something legitimately bad. It's just you and your dog. You always lose your cover guy. They can never keep up with you because you're just holding on to your lead, running through the woods, man. And there's nothing that gives you an adrenaline rush like that. We had a guy that took off from a police department that was west of mine, crashed into like this big conservation area. We go up to the car. There's body armor in the car. There's ammunition spilled all over the ground.
Damn.
There's a gun safe in between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. And the cop says, hey, man, he jumped this fence, like 11-foot fence. He jumped this fence into this conservation area, and it's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres. You know, it goes back far.
Okay.
So we cut a hole through the fence with these big wire cutters, and the dog and I crawl through the hole, and we're off, man. Yeah. It's like 2:30 in the morning. We tracked this guy like 2 miles into the woods, and lost cover and ended up finding the guy and biting him. But there's nothing that gives you that feeling, with doing 1078, there's a possibility in the future that I may have to leave law enforcement behind to do this full time. And it's like something I battle with myself. I don't know if I could do it, man. I don't know if I can leave this lifestyle and this work behind me. It's hard. And maybe that's something, like retiring. I'm sure that it was really difficult to step away and, no longer be the police.
Yeah, I mean, one piece of advice, I don't give advice too much, but I would say make sure that you are 100% confident that that is what you want to do. Because I thought when I got out, I was medically retired. I blew out my back. It's funny. We got a call one day. This self-professed lady called in, and she was 450 pounds. She needed help up the stairs. She was not. She may have been like a Ritz cracker short of 500, if not more. But I don't know how I got in back, and the rookie ends up in front. Literally, I looked past her. I'm like looking at him like WTF. Like how I don't understand to this day how he was in front because she had the biggest leg edemas I've ever seen, and she couldn't lift the right leg. So I had to lift it up for every stair. We get to the top. I put it on top. We crest the stair, and all of a sudden I see a right foot falling back. So I just squatted down and blasted her up the stair, and herniated 4 discs in one shot, and needed a couple of surgeries. Took like a year apart, and so I was long term line of duty injury. So when I got retired 2 years later in October 22. I hadn't seen the boys for a while. There was no goodbye for me. I thought it was a piece of it, to be honest with you, but as time went on, I wasn't. And, I guess we'll get into my story a little bit more later, but, you're this thing. I was this thing for 30 years. I was a part of this thing for 30 years. The brotherhood's not there anymore, and that's the part of a job that I love the most. These guys and girls are gone, essentially, out of sight, out of mind, and you're not going to keep in touch with most of them. And, it was like that. It was just gone. So people don't talk about it as much as they should. I've heard about it affecting guys, and I'm like, nah, I'm good, man. Thought I got out unscathed, but it's rare that you get out of this job unscathed, man. It takes a lot from you.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible. If you stay in this job for any long period of time, there will be something that you see you're doing in your career that takes a little piece of your soul. And honestly, man, I think about the job in general as, there's so many small traumas through a job that probably never really affect you. There's so many things that you go to and so many calls, so many bad things that you see and suicides and death. And there's so much that you see. And every time you see one of those things, it just takes a little bit from you, and it's just a shame that we're not doing anything to protect ourselves. At least I wasn't doing anything to protect myself other than going to the gym and working out. There was nothing that I was never taking a real proactive action against, like that silent killer,
Yeah.
The weird thing is
truth.
They say cops kill themselves at rates that are way higher than bad guys kill us. And it's because that silent killer is creeping in the background, the dead babies and the bad car accidents and the uses of force and all of the other things eventually add up, and that bucket gets full and it just pours itself out everywhere.
That's what it did for me.
Yeah,
and as you're going through it, you're in your career, but we don't think these things affect us. And then after I retired and I realized that PTSD and I started thinking about these things, I got deep into what I had been through. It's not normal. It's not normal to walk in to see a guy hanging from his oak beam in the kitchen, multiple suicides, homicides. I can't even imagine. I can't even try to count how many homicide scenes I've been to Atlanta. And, I would say at the time they affected me much, mostly dope boys, but, and they chose that life, but stuff is still burned to your psyche. Mm-hmm. And, you're seeing it over and over and over and over. And I remember in Atlanta, this one hurt. Like, this actually came up. I hadn't thought about this in probably 25 years, but, I'm a fairly new guy in Atlanta. I probably have a year and a half on the job, and I get a call of an unresponsive 11-year-old. So I get to the house, and I can hear wailing before I even get to the door. And I walk in, his 11-year-old on a living room, face up, eyes wide open. His grandmother, aunt are there in hysterics. I feel him. He's cold to the touch. I know he's dead. There's nothing anyone could do, but there's no way I'm not working this kid. So I start performing CPR. And, these poor ladies are just, you can imagine what it sounded like. And I wanted to be anywhere else in the world. It's just me. And as I'm doing the CPR, I can hear liquid coming up closer and closer, advancing up his windpipe. I'm like, what the hell is that? So I finally turn him on his side, and the liquid just pours out of his mouth just as fire is walking through the door. And I look at them. I'm like, what the fuck? And turns out he had died of bacterial meningitis. 11 years old. So they take him to the hospital, and 2 of the women hopped in the ambulance. One's with me, and she said, "Please, officer, tell me he's going to live. He's going to live." And one thing for you cops that are currently on the job, never promise anyone something you know is not true. Do not tell them He's going to be okay, which I did not do. I said, ma'am, I promise you they're working him as hard as they can. And, obviously he was dead. We get to the hospital, they deliver the news. I'm right in the midst of that. And had he not had meningitis, because I had to then be given a big dose of antibiotics, and I was told to essentially quarantine for 48 hours, I would have been back in service a half hour later. No one's talking to me. You go through this traumatic event. I'm not unloading it anywhere. I'm not processing it. It's just on to the next call, bro. And, tons more like that.
Dude, I listened to Sean Ryan had a cop on his podcast not too long ago, and he was talking about that he went to some traumatic event, and then, the next call that he got was some random, like a cat climbing on a car. And it's like, I had never, ever, ever thought about that in my entire career. Like, there's so many bad things that I've been to, so many bad things. And then you just go to the next thing and you give that person like those people have no clue where you just came from, what you just dealt with. And this thing, the neighbor cutting their grass, that is a big deal to them. They're very upset about it. And you have to act like you care. You have to give them 100% of you, or else, you're afraid they're going to call in and complain. And it's like, what? How do we do this, man? Like, how have I been able to compartmentalize all of these bad things in my career and just set them to the side and then go about my day? And maybe that's part of the reason why so many cops do commit suicide and so many cops do struggle, and there are so many divorces and alcoholism and opioid addictions and all the other things that happen, you've been a cop forever, you've seen it all. I always tell people all the time, I've seen that movie before. And it just keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening. And maybe that's part of the reason is because we are so good at compartmentalizing things that we don't feel like it's an issue. We legitimately don't feel like we have a problem with it. We compartmentalize it, we move on, and then it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds until, that volcano explodes. What's up, guys? Thanks for hanging in there to the end of the episode. I hope you guys are enjoying Mike's story. If you can't tell there's more from Mike, then until next week, I'll see you on the other side, boys.